right, what do you do?
You stand over by the podium. Alright, so right there is as far back as you want to go.
Okay.
And then you can go forward on this one with you.
Okay.
Starting.
All right. All right, everybody. Oh, hey, there we go. Let me try to hold this better. Better. All right. It's first time using a microphone. All right. So thank you all for coming. I can't promise I'm going to have the slide transitions that Ben had. That was pretty impressive. PowerPoint doesn't have those yet. But we'll see. We'll see what we can do. Maybe. That's true. It's a good point. But I know this is kind of, at that point we're all feeling that sleepy lunch feeling. So hopefully this will keep you guys interested. So let's get started. All right. So who am I? My name is Andy Rector. I'm a consultant out of the San Francisco office. I was a Bloomsburg graduate from 2015. I studied digital forensics and computer science. This is my first time speaking at a conference, so I'm pretty pumped to be doing it at Bloomsburg, so can't think of a better venue for that. I'm also a Python hobbyist. I know Dave Paney also had that on his slides. I might have pilfered that from your slide, I'm not sure. So my favorite creation is a highly sophisticated Python Skype bot that the San Francisco office absolutely needed to help pick lunch every Friday. We have challenging problems to solve at the San Francisco offices. So, all right. So what am I going to talk about with a name like Honey, I Stole, the C2 server? What are we going to talk about? So I'm going to give you an overview about the investigation and the attack itself to kind of set up the actual stealing of the C2 server. Stealing is maybe not the right word, but you'll see what I mean, obtaining. I'm going to talk about some of the challenges faced with analyzing a C2 server. It's pretty exciting. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, and the approach of it was interesting. It's a pretty rare thing to happen. We don't get C2 servers to analyze very often, because attackers own those. We don't. And then I'm going to talk about some of the victories that we had, just because there's a lot of cool things to get from a C2 server, as you might expect. All right. So for you guys to understand how this is different from a normal investigation, first you have to understand how a typical Mandy investigation runs. So first, a client's going to call us, right? And when a client calls us, they're not usually in the best state of mind, right? They're a little worried because something bad happened, and they need answers to questions really, really quickly. So they call us, we hear what they have to say, and then we make a decision whether or not we need to deploy technology, specifically something for the network, and then also something for the endpoint. So once we have our technology deployed, we find evil, solve crime, right? That's our tagline. So it's kind of corny, but it's kind of what we do. It's pretty cool. This is a very cyclic approach where we look for indicators of compromise, we find something, we do analysis on a single system, we find more indicators, and then we restart the whole process and start scanning the environment for additional indicators based on what we found. And we keep pulling that string until there's nothing else to find, right? So once we've found everything, we go into a eradication mode. And this eradication is basically, let's kick the attacker out of the environment. We don't want you in here anymore. You're not invited. So after that, we have post-remediation monitoring, where we stay in the environment for a little bit just to make sure the attacker doesn't take a second hack at it, right? We got to make sure that we didn't miss anything and the attacker's actually out of the environment. So after all that, we say goodbye, sayonara, nice working with you, client. Let's move on to our next engagement. And these usually last anywhere from 1 to 2 months generally. So this investigation started like any other. Client calls us. They're like, hey, we're seeing some really, really weird stuff. There's these really weird service installs. So when you guys look at this big, huge, ugly blob of stuff, and think if you see anything weird about this. And there's probably a lot of things you might see weird about this. Right. Base 64. What are you doing there? So whoa, it's highlighted. So you look at all this, and yeah, there's a lot of really, really weird things. So one of the things is when you see base64 blobs like that being installed as a service, that's not too normal. That's not a normal thing that you'll see in a client's environment. Additionally, some of the other things that you see, like ComSpec, which is just an environment variable for the command prompt, and also PowerShell executing with execution policy bypasses. It's just some weird stuff. That's not normal. Anybody want to take a guess which penetration testing platform this comes from? Yeah, that's a interpreter payload. That's exactly what it is. So, like, okay, this looks a lot like Metasploit, right? So, let's go ahead and start sweeping for Metasploit indicators. So Metasploit has a lot of things that are really easy to detect. So one of the things is a workstation name that is really, really random. And by random, I mean it's a 16-character alphanumeric string. I'm not saying it's not possible to have that in your environment, but when you do see something like that, it's pretty weird and it should trigger some questions at the very least. Secondly, one of the things we like to do is stack service was installed event log messages, not because service being installed is evil necessarily, but back to that base64 slide, we can search for all services being installed that have those strings in it and find the number of systems that have been affected potentially. So investigation is able to be scoped really, really quickly because Metasploit has well-known indicators. So we have 129 systems identified as either accessed or compromised, 116 compromised accounts. We also see RDP sessions. The attacker just RDPs into a couple of different systems and looks at passwords that are just stored in plain text on user's desktop. And by that, I mean stuff like password.txt hanging out on a desktop. Not a great security practice. So that's what the attacker is after. They stole a bunch of creds, and we also were able to identify the initial attack vector. And this was just a public-facing web server that had some really, really poorly written code on it that allowed for SQL injection. Kind of a common attack vector. So, yes?
Did they go from SQL injection to dumping credentials, or did they get code execution with SQL injection?
So what they actually used was XP command shell to they got SQL injection on the server itself, and then they used XP command shell to actually move laterally, and then start bringing in their like interpreter payloads. So C2, for those of you guys who don't know, C2 is command and control. This is where the attacker is executing their commands from. Let's look at that base64 blob again. So remember this base64 blob, it's got a whole lot of stuff. By the way, fun fact actually, I was debating whether or not I should say this, but I left a little Easter egg in here. So if anybody wants to take a picture of that and then type all of that into a interpreter and decode what that says, it'd be kind of fun. But I'll just tell you what it is because nobody's going to do that. That's crazy. Huh? Yeah. So base64 is just an encoding mechanism that can be used really by anybody, and it just takes text data and encodes it using like A through Z, and then 0 through actually not A through Z. Thank you, Dr. Riley. Thanks for the rescue. Needed that. So, anyways, so that base64 blob can be decoded, and when you decode that, you get a pretty lengthy PowerShell script. And this PowerShell script has some additional functions that also have base64 in it. So these base64 functions can be decoded, and actually you can actually see what the configurations are for the interpreter payload. And these configurations have things like ports and IP addresses. So now we've got an IP address. So usually what we do when we have an IP address is send this to the client and say, they can make a risk-based decision, basically. Do they want to take this IP and block it? That's one possibility. We don't always recommend that because we like to get a full scope of the environment before we actually start trying to play our hand, that we know that they're there and we know where they're connecting to. But either way, we like to give the client some indicators at least, so they can at least make some internal alerts or do what they want with it. So we thought they were just going to block it. That's not what they did. So instead, they used a free tool. I'm sure you've heard of domain tools. They did a little whois on the IP address and traced this back to a actual company. And this company was a small-time competitor. Okay, so let's all put our tinfoil hats on. This is getting weird. Is this like some kind of crazy espionage thing going on? Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Actually, turns out that their deal their relationship had been terminated the week before the attack had started. So that's kind of interesting, right? Okay, so the client actually just calls up this third party and they say, hey, you're attacking us. There's a server and it's attacking us. We see the C2. We actually need you to just provide that server to us so we can take a forensic image of it. Okay. So here's the crazy thing. They actually just did that. That's what they did. They just went ahead and provided the entire physical server to our client. No questions asked. Like, what? That does what? No legal ramifications. Like, we're really, yeah, they really did that. So when we heard about that, we're like, you did what? We call up our lawyers. We're like, hey, is this okay? Like, can we even image this? Like, there just seems like there's something shady going on. Like, are we allowed to actually do this? Well, turns out they freely gave it away. So yeah, there's no problem. So what we did is we took a couple of our guys in the LA office. They went on site with the client, and the client never left the room, and they actually imaged the entire server. Cool. So this is, at this point, everybody in our office is like going crazy. We're like, I want the C2 server. No, I want the C2 server. And we're like, no, I get the C2 server because I've been there for a year and a half. So, no, I actually just wandered around a Mario Kart. So I get the C2 server. So let's talk about some of the challenges that I faced. One, this was just a Windows server. So we start with just some classic file system analysis, right? So what kind of things we're actually seeing on the disk? Not a whole lot of really, really interesting things. Some privilege escalation tools, some password dumpers, such as Mimikatz. Really common stuff that we're seeing and like, okay, not really that interesting for a C2 server, except for one crazy thing. They downloaded VMware Workstation, a Kali Linux ISO, and then installed a VM in July of 2016. That's really aggressive. That's intense. You're not worried about anything, are you, Mr. Attacker? You're just going to go and install a Kali Linux ISO, no questions asked. Okay. Oh, right. They actually created their own user account as well. Pretty aggressive stuff. Okay. Yeah. Well, it gets harder. That part was easy. So, little investigation inception going on. This is where the interesting stuff is going to be, right? Okay, they made a Kali Linux ISO. I'm thinking they're probably using Metasploit. We already know they're using Metasploit. Metasploit's going to be really interesting. Hopefully this VM has a lot of really juicy information, right? So, export the VM. Let's repeat our file system process. So, start looking for some sources. This is a total gear switch at this point. Now we're doing Linux forensics, right? So start looking for artifacts that could help us piece together what the attacker actually did to our client. So secure access logs, not seeing a whole lot of really interesting things there. Lots of login attempts, but it's actually public facing, so they're getting scanned all the time. Kind of makes sense. Not that interesting. An interpreter configuration file, some things that were already installed by default that we could tell the attacker executed, like beef and SQL map. Keyword searches, interesting. Once again, we're seeing a lot of things that the attacker that we are already identified during the course of our investigation. Bash history, not that interesting, except for Postgres bash history. That had some interesting stuff in it. So wheels are turning. So Postgres tells us a little bit of a story. We can tell that the attacker was using the Postgres database, and we know that they were also using Metasploit because we see the interpreter configuration file. So start turning the wheels. Well, maybe they're actually just storing all the data from their attack in the Postgres database, which is actually something that Metasploit actually encourages, right? Because attackers are people too. They have to remember things, right? And they're not going to just remember it in their head. Just put it in a Postgres database. Okay, so let me just, export postgres.db and put it in my Postgres viewer and just export everything and done, right? Well, not quite. Actually, Postgres is pretty ugly to deal with. So Postgres stores everything across hundreds of binary files, and there isn't a publicly available parser for it. So what do? Well, it's a VMDK. The attacker used VMware Workstation. I can use VMware Workstation, right? So why don't we just go ahead and boot this VMDK up? Turns out it has a password on it. Okay, well, a couple Google searches later and talking with some of our proactive guys, well, it's actually pretty easy to just bypass that. And you can actually just modify grub, ask it to execute bash on startup, and then you have terminal, and then so is an image though, right? I guess, but you could also have just executed. So what I did was just execute password WD or whatever and change the password. And now I have created a password root, or actually changed the password for the root account. And well, I know what Kali uses by default. It's Tor. So it's like, I'm just going to change it to Tor. So change the password. And now we're into the system now. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm the hacker now. Yes. This is a lot more exciting than my usual, spreadsheets. Excel spreadsheets is just where I live. But all of a sudden I'm like at a bash terminal and just like hanging out in Metasploit and just accessing Postgres databases. This feels pretty cool and kind of badass. Like, okay. So the Postgres database, or the Postgres history file, had the name of the database and the username and password. And it was super, super complicated. MSF. Okay, for all three of them. Great. So you can just use Metasploit to directly interface with the Postgres database. So boot up MSF console, connect to the database, and I have a whole bunch of commands I can execute. I can just look at the creds, hosts, loots, nodes, services, vulns, all this giving me a lot of really good information about what the attacker had done in the environment. So that was really cool, but here's the problem. I didn't have any timestamps associated with that, and one of the things we like to provide as a deliverable is a really nice timeline, right? So if you don't have timestamps, you can't make a timeline. So what we could provide is, here's all the credentials that were affected definitively, here's all the systems that were accessed definitively. This is really good stuff, but still not answering the question of, did we detect everything they actually did in the environment? Okay, so why not just bypass Metasploit, like just interact with the database directly? So use pSQL and connect to the database. Tons and tons of tables, lots of tables. So the ones most important, these Metasploit credential ones, tell us everything that the attacker, actually obtained as far as credentials, and additional data such as these session events, which is like full maturper sessions, just pretty crazy. So there's this is like real data too. I used a highly sophisticated tool to sanitize the data. It's a Microsoft Paint. So, but totally real data from the actual Postgres database. This is the Metasploit credential publics table. This is the realms table, which tells you certain domains that were enumerated, as well as the timestamps you can see. And then this logins table, which gives you information as far as which credentials they used, and then or they attempted to use, or which ones they didn't use or totally untried, last time they attempted to use it, whether or not they're successful or not. So really, really granular data. This is pretty awesome. And this is the Meterpreter sessions I was talking about. So it's pretty amazing that Postgres is storing entire Meterpreter sessions in the database. So what this means is that once you have pwned a box and you're executing different modules in Metasploit, it's storing all of this, including the actual modules that are being used and the payloads that were being delivered and the post-exploitation modules. Like you can see at the bottom, like post Windows gather enum admins, just really, really granular data. This is pretty awesome. So Postgres tables have a lot of really granular data. So now I can build an actual timeline. So we got timestamps, we got credentials, total Meterpreter sessions. I'm considering this a victory. I'm feeling pretty good. So this is at the point where basically we can provide the client a really nice deliverable, an entire encompassing product that says what happened during the attack. So we have all the systems that were moved to, all the credentials that were taken, every file they accessed, every command they executed. This is really, really good stuff. So I'm pretty happy. So happy client, happy consultant. But as you guys saw before, there's some previous databases that were dropped, right? The attacker also installed this VM in July of 2016. The attack didn't start until September of 2016. So what was going on for those prior 2 months? I'm pretty curious about this. I'm sure you guys are curious. I can tell by your expressions that you're crazy curious about this. So I'm going to go into detail about it. So based on the Postgres command history, we know that there is extra tables, right? They had dropped at least 2 previous tables. So I'm not really sure how you're supposed to recover this. I did a bunch of keyword searches, and they all showed up in an allocated space. But an allocated space does not make for a real nice deliverable. Like, it's all unstructured. It's not easy to make sense of. And once again, Postgres rows are stored in a totally binary format. So you have to parse it. So I used the Google Science Machine and asked Google, how do I recover a deleted Postgres database? Not a whole lot on this, but it did lead me to a professor, Alexander Razin. He's a professor of computer security at DePaul, and he was actually really, really helpful. Him and a doctoral student were working on a tool called DICE, and that's Database Image Content Explorer. And basically, it's a Python library for recovering rows from basically you just provided an image, and there we go. And provided an image, and it'll recover rows from all sorts of DBMSs. So MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, SQL Server. So reach out to him. It's not a public tool yet, but that's just because it's still in development. But he gave me a prototype. So I ran it, and I got a bunch of data from it. This was really cool. I got accounts and domains that weren't previously available from the Postgres databases. So this is cool. I know that I was actually getting data, but it also wasn't parsing timestamps correctly. And I knew that you could get extra data like session data and other tables that were available because I saw them. I know they exist. So what do? Well, this is where I become a Python hobbyist again and go into the rabbit hole of Postgres. So Postgres is open source. So I started reading the C source code for Postgres, but I'm not a C genius, so it took me a while. There's a lot of structures in C that I didn't just totally understand, so it took me some time, but it was a great learning experience. I was like pinging guys like all the time, like, hey, what is this union struct thing? I don't know what that means. Like help, and they were really helpful, and was able to actually make a Postgres parser to carve out all rows from a flat binary file or a raw image. So a little bit into that. So Postgres has a bit of a structure. So it's not a header that you can actually, just search for these 5 bytes and you got a Postgres table. But it does have a 24-byte header that stores certain pieces of information that you can use kind of as an entropy check. So basically what my tool does is look for this Postgres header, and then it parses the row pointers, which follow that. These are 4-byte structures, and they contain really important information like the offset that it's located at, offset that the row data is located at, as well as the size of the row. So now I have a Postgres table, I have a bunch of rows, I know how big they are, and I know where they're located. So now I can look at actually parsing the row itself. So these rows have structure as well that you have to use to figure out how long certain fields are in these rows, which is pretty challenging. So at the end of all that, what I have is a parser that will read a header, read the rows, and then also parse those rows based on the sizes of the data that's being read. So this basically what you have after that is something that you can output based on the row schema, and what it does is recover all these deleted entry, or not deleted entries, just blankly looking for Postgres rows. So there is still research ongoing to identify the number of affected victims for this. At least 3 victims based on the data that was recovered, but it was awesome to be able to see that, yeah, there was definitely other campaigns going on besides the campaign that was going on our client. So lastly, some attacker insights, right? Who's that guy? It's Putin. So Metasploit gets the job done. So one of the things the client actually asked us is like, do you think this attacker is sophisticated? And so when I see Metasploit, I don't typically find that to be a platform that sophisticated attackers use. However, it gets the job done, right? An attacker that knows how to use this tool really and can exploit security flaws that should be patched, back in like 2010, can use Metasploit and accomplish their goals really, really effectively. Additionally, attackers aren't that concerned about being caught, at least some of them. Once again, I think it was really, really aggressive to just take control of this Windows server and then download programs like Windows or like VMware Workstation and a Kali Linux ISO, and then just use that as a vehicle to attack other clients. Like it seemed really aggressive, and they didn't take any precautions to cover up their data, right? And then lastly, well, attackers are humans and they make human mistakes. They had a password on their VM, but then they used MSF as their password for a Postgres database. Had there been, some kind of password protection on those databases or on the Postgres database, that would have been a lot harder to recover any kind of data, and it would have been a challenge, to say the least. And it might have derailed a lot of this progress. So that is it. Any questions? So back to the fact that that the client actually reached out to this third party and got the image or got the physical server from them. It actually makes notifications really dicey because that image has proprietary data from this third party. So we'd actually have to have their permission to notify other victims that we identified in the analysis, because it's not our client's data, it's actually that third party's data. So the legalese of that is dicey, to say the least. So, yes. Yeah. So, uh, no, I think that's actually Metasploit something. Metasploit, yeah, Metasploit framework. Yeah. So it's actually, yeah, no, I actually think it's the default password for using the Postgres database. Yeah. So it's kind of goofy. Yeah. So, uh, it depends on the groups that we're seeing. So a lot of the financial groups that we track actually do rely on Metasploit pretty heavily. And that's, I think the main reason for that is because Metasploit provides a really nice vehicle for distributing or quickly moving throughout an environment. It just has it all built in for it. And it's just easy to do like lateral movement using it. And it provides a nice framework to, you don't have to make any custom backdoors. It's easy and effective. But a lot of the APT groups use very sophisticated malware, right? That they have actually like developed themselves. Yeah, I didn't see anything like that. No. Yeah, it was crazy. We were all just kind of like in shock that they had done something like that. They didn't care. It was kind of interesting. Question? I don't know if I feel like I'm like, oh, nice.